Welcome back to Whispers in the Dark. Tonight, we return to a place every child knows. A bedroom with glow in the dark, stars on the ceiling. A wooden toy chest at the foot of the bed. Shelves crowded with action figures, dolls, stuffed animals, plastic soldiers, board games, and smiling things that wait patiently in the dark. We tell children their toys come alive when no one is watching. We never tell them what happens when the toys grow angry. We never tell them what they remember. And we never tell them what they do when they decide they are tired of being played with. So turn the lights down low. Check the corners of your room. And whatever you do, do not look too long at the toy you loved most when you were little, because it may still be looking back. Now let's begin. The first thing Caleb Reed ever loved was a cowboy doll. Not the kind from a shop window, not the collectible kind sealed behind plastic and sold by men with soft hands and careful voices. This one was old even before Caleb was born. Its fabric was sun-faded. Its brown hat had a bite mark in the brim. One stitched cheek was darker than the other, as though it had once been kissed by a child with jam on his mouth and never fully cleaned. His name was Marshall Buck. That was the name stitched on the bottom of one cloth boot in red thread that had gone almost black with age. Caleb's father had owned him first. Before that, Caleb's grandfather. The doll had passed from hand to hand for nearly 50 years, through bedrooms and moving boxes and attics and damp basements, through homes where people laughed, drank, argued, cried, aged, and died. Marshall Buck had seen generations of children grow out of him. He had lain at the foot of beds, listening to whispered secrets. He had been dragged through mud. He had been tied to chair legs. He had been thrown downstairs. He had been kissed goodnight by trembling little mouths. By the time Caleb got him, the cowboy's painted eyes had cracked into a web of fine lines. One eye had a pale spot across the pupil, giving him the appearance of something blind that was still able to see perfectly well. Caleb adored him. He took Marshall Buck everywhere. To breakfast, where the doll sat beside the cereal bowl and stared at Caleb's mother with his small, varnished grin. To the garden, where Caleb buried him up to the neck and said he was in quicksand. To the bathtub, where Caleb's mother panicked and pulled the soaked cowboy from the water, squeezing brownish liquid from his stuffing into the sink. And at night, Caleb tucked him under one arm and whispered stories into his soft cotton ear. Caleb's room sat at the back of the house on the second floor. It was a bright room during the day, with blue walls, white curtains, and a carpet patterned with roads and little buildings. A plastic town spread across the floor. There was a toy garage, a fire station, a train track that never stayed together, a fort made from cardboard, a bucket of little green soldiers, a plush dog with one floppy ear, and a wide wooden toy chest painted yellow. Above the bed, Caleb's mother had stuck a constellation of glowing stars to the ceiling. Every night after she kissed him goodnight, she would turn off the lamp, and the stars would bloom slowly overhead, green and cold, like something phosphorescent growing at the bottom of the ocean. The toys watched from their shelves. Caleb never thought they looked frightening. Not then. A child can forgive any expression on a toy. A grin means happiness. Wide eyes mean kindness. Stiff arms mean waiting. Caleb did not yet understand that waiting can become hatred if it lasts long enough. His favorite game was called the rescue. He made Marshall Buck save the others from terrible dangers. He tied the plush dog to the window blind cord and made the cowboy climb the curtain to rescue him. He buried the little soldiers under blankets and called it an avalanche. He locked a porcelain ballerina named Miss Lottie inside the toy chest and said it was a prison. Miss Lottie had belonged to Caleb's mother. She was delicate and pale, with tiny glass eyes, a painted rosebud mouth, and a cracked porcelain neck hidden beneath lace. Her arms were jointed with old elastic, so they trembled whenever Caleb picked her up. She had once played a little music when wound with a key, but the spring inside her had broken long ago. Now, when turned, she made only a strained clicking noise, like teeth chattering behind closed lips. Caleb did not like her much. She frightened him, though he would never admit it. Sometimes, in the dark, he thought she had moved from one end of the shelf to the other. Sometimes, when moonlight touched her face, he thought her painted mouth looked wet. He asked his mother to put her away, but his mother only smiled sadly and said, "She was mine when I was your age. Be kind to her." So Caleb was kind in the way children are kind when they are also cruel. He included her in games. He gave her important parts. She was always the queen in danger, the witch in the tower, the prisoner, the monster, the ghost. And Marshall Buck always defeated her. "Bang," Caleb would say, pressing the cowboy's soft arm toward her porcelain head. Then he would knock Miss Lottie from the shelf. Sometimes her head struck the carpet with a dull little clack. Once her right eye turned slightly inward afterward and never pointed straight again. That was the first time Caleb felt watched. He had been 5 years old. He was sitting cross-legged on the floor in the evening, surrounded by plastic animals. Rain whispered against the window. Downstairs, his mother washed dishes while his father spoke on the phone in the tight, angry voice he used when bills arrived. Caleb had placed Miss Lottie on the edge of the bed. Marshall Buck stood in front of her, hat tipped low, painted grin lifted. "You have been bad," Caleb told the doll in a low voice. Miss Lottie stared over him with her mismatched eyes. "You have to go in jail." He opened the toy chest. Inside, the smell was thick and old. Wood, dust, fabric, plastic, something sour beneath it all, like forgotten breath. Caleb tossed Miss Lottie in. She landed face up among blocks and cars. He began to close the lid. Then something tapped from inside. Not a shifting toy, not wood settling. 3 tiny knocks. Caleb froze with both hands on the lid. His room seemed to draw away from him, stretching at the edges. The rain went quiet. The house went quiet. Even his father's voice downstairs faded, until there was only the sound of Caleb breathing through his nose. Tap. This one came slower. Patient. Caleb opened the lid. Miss Lottie stared up from the toy chest. Her porcelain face had cracked from one corner of the painted mouth to the edge of her jaw. It looked like she was smiling wider. Caleb screamed. His mother came running. His father followed, annoyed, phone still in hand. They found Caleb sobbing near the door, pointing at the toy chest. There was knocking, he cried. She knocked. His father crouched beside the chest and rummaged through it, lifting cars, blocks, plush animals, plastic dinosaurs. Nothing in here but junk, he said. His mother picked up Miss Lottie. Oh, Caleb, her face is cracked. She did it. Dolls do not crack themselves. She knocked. His father gave a tired laugh. That cowboy of yours knocked too. Marshall Buck lay on the bed, one cloth arm hanging over the edge. His pale cracked eye faced Caleb. Caleb did not answer. That night, his mother moved Miss Lottie to the top shelf of the closet, behind folded blankets. The bedroom returned to normal. For a while, but children forget terror if daylight returns enough times. By 6 years old, Caleb had almost forgotten the knocking. Almost. He still did not like the closet after dark, and he never looked directly at the space between the closet door and the floor, where a thin black line seemed to breathe when the room was quiet. But he kept playing. Marshall Buck remained his hero, his protector, his best friend. The other toys filled the room like a small, silent town. There was Captain Orion, a plastic space ranger with a scratched visor and a stiff, clicking wing pack. Caleb had found him at a car boot sale. His silver suit was chipped and one knee bent the wrong way. But Caleb gave him a brave voice and made him Marshall Buck's rival. There was Roxy, a green rubber dinosaur with a torn mouth. If squeezed, she made a faint wheeze instead of a roar. There was Patches, the stuffed dog with button eyes and a threadbare belly. There was Tin Tom, a metal drummer boy whose drumsticks rose and fell when a key turned in his back. There was the army bucket, full of identical green soldiers frozen in gestures of courage. Crawling, aiming, throwing grenades, waving others forward. Caleb loved lining them up and stepping on them when the battle was over. There were dolls from old relatives, cars without wheels, puppets with tangled strings, puzzles missing pieces, and a Jack-in-the-Box with a clown named Mr. Grin. Mr. Grin was Caleb's least favorite after Miss Lottie. He had a white face, red cheeks, yellow hair, and a pointed cloth hat. His mouth was painted open in a laugh that showed square white teeth. The box played a nursery tune when cranked, but the melody had slowed over the years until it sounded tired and sick. Caleb rarely opened him. He did not like the way Mr. Grin came out, not springing, not popping, rising slowly, like something waking from a coffin. On Caleb's 7th birthday, everything changed. His parents held a party in the garden. Balloons snapped against the fence. Paper plates blew across the grass. Children screamed and chased one another with foam swords and sticky hands. Inside, the house smelled of cake, icing, damp coats, and the warm plastic scent of new toys. Caleb received gifts, bright ones, modern ones, things with batteries and voices and lights. A robot that could walk, a remote-controlled car, a talking dinosaur, a new space commander called Starblade Max, with phrases recorded in a heroic voice. The old toys watched from the shelves. Marshall Buck sat on the pillow. Captain Orion stood near the lamp. Patches slumped under the desk. Tin Tom leaned against the wall. Drumsticks lifted forever. In the closet, behind the blankets, Miss Lottie waited. Caleb played with the new toys all day. By evening, Marshall Buck had fallen between the bed and the wall. No one noticed. That night, Caleb slept with Starblade Max under his arm. The new toy was hard and glossy and smelled of fresh packaging. When Caleb rolled over, it spoke from his blankets. Victory is written in the stars. Caleb smiled in his sleep. In the darkness beside the bed, something moved. The first sound was fabric dragging on carpet, then the small creak of plastic joints, then a whisper too low for Caleb to hear. The room filled with motion. Tiny shapes shifted in moonlight. A soldier crawled across the carpet, stiff elbows pulling him forward. Patches lifted his head, button eyes dull and black. Tin Tom's drumsticks twitched. Captain Orion turned his cracked visor toward the bed, and from the narrow gap between the bed and wall, Marshall Buck dragged himself free. Dust clung to his cloth face. One leg twisted beneath him. His hat was gone. He lay still for a long moment, face turned toward Caleb, toward Starblade Max. Then Marshall Buck stood, not like a doll lifted by a child, not with the wobbling imbalance of something soft. He rose with effort, like an old man pulling himself upright after a beating. His stitched grin had always looked cheerful in daylight. In moonlight, it looked like a wound sewn shut. The toys gathered around the bed. They did not speak in words at first. They clicked, rustled, tapped, squeaked. A language of hinges and stuffing and old mechanisms. Captain Orion's wing pack opened with a dry snap. Tin Tom began to drum without music. From inside the closet, something answered. 3 knocks. The toys froze. The closet door had not been fully shut. A sliver of darkness showed between the door and frame. The blankets shifted on the top shelf. Something porcelain scraped wood. Miss Lottie's tiny face appeared in the gap. One eye straight, one eye turned inward. Her cracked smile wider than before. That was the night the toys held council. Caleb slept through it. Children sleep deeply when something wants them not to wake. The toys moved in a circle on the carpet. Some could barely crawl. Some had to be carried by stronger toys. The soldiers formed ranks. Patches sat at Marshal Buck's side, head tilted. Captain Orion stood opposite him, visor catching a stripe of moon. Mr. Grin's box trembled on the shelf. No one touched it. Miss Lottie came down from the closet last. She did not climb. She was lowered by strings from an old puppet whose painted hands shook as though afraid of her. Her porcelain feet touched the carpet soundlessly. Her head turned toward Marshal Buck. They looked at each other. Old favorites, old victims, old witnesses. Then Miss Lottie raised one trembling hand and pointed toward the bed, toward Caleb, toward the shiny new toy in his arms. Marshal Buck's head lowered. The council ended. The first punishment was small. In the morning, Caleb woke to find Starblade Max on the floor. Its right arm had been torn off. Wires stuck from the socket like veins. The plastic hand lay near the toy chest. Fingers curled as though it had tried to crawl away. Caleb blamed the dog, even though the Reeds had no dog. His mother blamed cheap manufacturing. His father blamed Caleb. "You break everything," he said, holding the toy's severed arm. Caleb cried and insisted he had not done it. Marshal Buck sat on the pillow beside him. His hat had somehow returned to his head. Over the next weeks, the accidents worsened. The remote-controlled car drove itself down the stairs and shattered against the front door. The walking robot was found in the kitchen sink, face down in dirty water, still twitching as bubbles rose from its speaker. The talking dinosaur repeated one phrase all night from inside the toy chest. "I love to play," again and again. By morning, its mouth had been forced open so far that the rubber split at both corners. Its voice box continued clicking after the batteries were removed. Caleb grew afraid of his room. He stopped sleeping properly. He began to notice things. Marshal Buck was never where he left him. Captain Orion faced a different direction every morning. The green soldiers formed little circles around new toys, as if surrounding prisoners. Patches appeared at the foot of the bed each dawn, though Caleb always put him on the chair before sleeping. And Miss Lottie was back on the shelf. No one admitted moving her. Her cracked smile had darkened. Dust gathered in the fracture, making it look like dried blood. Caleb told his mother. At first, she comforted him. She checked under the bed, kissed his forehead, and sprayed lavender water around the room, calling it monster spray. But the more he cried, the more tired she became. "Caleb, enough," she said one night, standing in the doorway with her dressing gown pulled tight. "They are toys. They move. They do not. They hate me." Her face changed then. Not anger. Something older. Something remembered. She looked at Miss Lottie on the shelf and went very still. For a moment, Caleb thought his mother saw it too. Then she walked across the room and turned the doll's face toward the wall. "There," she said, but her voice shook. Caleb did not sleep that night. He watched the shelf until his eyes burned. At midnight, Miss Lottie turned her head back around. Slowly, porcelain scraping wallpaper, Caleb wet the bed and screamed until his father stormed in. That was when his father decided to clear the room. The next Saturday, he brought black bin bags upstairs. Caleb sat on the landing with his knees to his chest, while his father threw old toys away. The soldiers clattered into the bags. Patches went in. Tin Tom went in. Roxy went in. Captain Orion went in after a moment of resistance, his broken knee snagging on the lip of the toy chest. "Dad, no," Caleb begged. "You said they scare you." "Not Buck." His father held Marshall Buck by one leg. The cowboy hung upside down, cloth arms dangling, cracked eyes staring. Caleb rushed forward and grabbed him. "Not Buck." His father's face hardened. For 1 second, Caleb thought he would rip the doll from his arms. Instead, he released it. "Fine, keep the cowboy, but the rest goes." His mother stood in the hallway, pale and silent. When his father reached for Miss Lottie, she said, "Leave that one." He turned. "Why?" "She was mine. She is creepy as hell. Leave her." The argument that followed was quiet but sharp. In the end, Miss Lottie stayed. So did Marshall Buck. Everything else went into black bags and was carried downstairs. Caleb watched from the top of the stairs as his father dragged them outside to the wheelie bin. The plastic inside shifted. A small green soldier pressed against the stretched black plastic, one hand raised, frozen in a plea for help. Then the lid slammed shut. That night, the house did not sleep. The first sound came from outside, a soft scraping beneath Caleb's window. He lay stiff in bed, Marshall Buck clutched to his chest. Scrape. Something was climbing the wall. Caleb turned his head toward the window. The curtains hung closed. Beyond them, the glass reflected a faint green glow from the ceiling stars. Then a tiny hand appeared at the bottom of the window. Plastic fingers hooked over the sill outside. Caleb stopped breathing. Another hand appeared. Then a round green helmet. One of the toy soldiers pulled itself up against the glass. Its molded face had no moving mouth, no eyes beyond shallow dents. But Caleb knew it was looking at him. More soldiers rose behind it, dozens of them, their plastic limbs bent in ways they were never meant to bend. Some had melted marks from being left too close to a radiator. Some were crushed from the bin lorry's first bite. One dragged half a leg behind him, leaving a dark smear across the glass. They tapped their rifles against the window. Not loudly, just enough. Caleb screamed for his mother. The soldiers dropped out of sight before she arrived. She pulled open the curtains and showed him the empty night. But on the outside of the glass were small, muddy handprints, too small for any child. His mother stared at them for a long time. Behind her, Marshall Buck sat upright on Caleb's pillow. By morning, the bin outside was open. The black bags were shredded. No toys remained inside. Caleb's father blamed foxes. But foxes do not line up broken toys along a garden path. Foxes do not arrange plastic soldiers into ranks facing the house. Foxes do not place a stuffed dog on the doorstep with its belly cut open and its stuffing arranged in a heart. Caleb's mother found Patches first. She screamed. His father cursed and kicked the stuffed dog into the flower bed. When his foot struck it, something inside Patches cracked. Not a squeaker, not a button, a small bone. The sound was unmistakable, wet and brittle. His father froze. Then Patches twitched. His torn belly pulsed, as though something beneath the stuffing took a breath. His father stepped back. The dog's button eyes turned toward him. One paw dragged forward, then another. Stuffing leaked behind it in clumps. Caleb's father grabbed a garden spade and brought it down. Once, twice, again and again. Patches burst apart under the blows. Cotton sprayed across the path, but mixed into the stuffing were things that should not have been there. Tiny teeth, black hair, a strip of something pink and glistening that moved like a worm. Caleb's father vomited into the grass. That afternoon, he burned the toys in a metal barrel behind the shed. Caleb watched from the kitchen window. Patches went first, then the soldiers, then Roxy, then Tin Tom, then Captain Orion, whose plastic visor bubbled and collapsed inward like a melting eye. The toys burned badly. They smoked thick and black. They stank of plastic, cloth, scorched paint, and something else. Something matey. Something that made Caleb's mother cover her mouth and walk away. Marshall Buck sat beside Caleb on the kitchen table. Miss Lottie watched from the shelf above the radiator. When the last flame died, Caleb's father stirred the ashes with the spade until nothing recognizable remained. There, he said, done. He was wrong. At 3 a.m, the nursery tune began. Caleb woke instantly. He knew the melody. Slow, sick, coming from the hall. Mr. Grin. He had been in the black bag. He had been in the bin. He had not been burned. The tune crept through the dark house, notes warped and dragging, each one thinner than the last. Caleb sat up. His door was open. He never slept with it open. The hallway beyond was black, except for moonlight on the banister. The music came closer. Caleb wanted to call for his parents, but his throat closed. A square shape appeared in the doorway. Mr. Grin's box. It moved in tiny jerks, as though pushed from behind by invisible fingers. The crank turned by itself. The tune played. Caleb whimpered. Marshall Buck was not in the bed. The box stopped just inside the room. The crank turned slower. The lid trembled. Caleb pulled the blanket to his chin. The final note stretched until it became a dry squeal. Then the lid opened. Mr. Grin did not pop out. He rose, inch by inch. His yellow hair appeared first, then his white forehead, then his eyes. They had always been painted blue. Now they were wet and red, set deep inside the clown's face, as though real eyes had been pushed behind the paint. His mouth opened wider than the painted smile. The square white teeth separated. Behind them was darkness full of thread. "Caleb," whispered Mr. Grin. The voice was small, old, and clogged with dust. Caleb screamed. The clown launched from the box. Not upward, forward. Its spring stretched across the room, like a spine pulled from a body. Mr. Grin struck Caleb in the chest and wrapped cloth arms around his neck. His painted teeth pressed against Caleb's cheek. The smell that came from him was unbearable. Old pennies, rotten milk, a closed drawer full of dead insects. Caleb clawed at him, feeling the cloth split beneath his nails. Inside the clown's body, something soft and hot wriggled. Mr. Grin bit him. The teeth sank into the flesh beneath Caleb's eye. Pain exploded white. Caleb screamed so hard he felt his throat tear. His mother burst into the room and ripped the clown away. It came loose, with a strip of Caleb's skin between its teeth. Blood ran down Caleb's face, hot and thick, dripping from his chin onto the blanket. His mother shrieked and flung Mr. Grin against the wall. The clown struck hard. Its head bent backward. For a second, it lay limp. Then it laughed. Not a recording, not a squeak, a laugh like a man choking in a chimney. Caleb's father appeared in the doorway, holding a hammer. He smashed Mr. Grin until the box collapsed, until the spring twisted, until the clown's face split open. Inside the cloth head was a mass of damp thread, black hair, and tiny bones bound together with old chewing gum. At the center of it all was a child's baby tooth. Caleb recognized it. His mother had kept his first lost tooth in a little envelope in her jewelry box. The envelope was found later, empty, after the ambulance came and went, after Caleb's cheek was cleaned and stitched, after the police officer looked around the bedroom with polite disbelief, after his father repeated the word prank 6 times, and no one believed him. The Reed family stopped pretending. Something was wrong with the toys. Something had always been wrong. Caleb's mother finally told the truth. She told it at the kitchen table just before dawn, while Caleb sat with a bandage taped to his face and Marshall Buck resting in front of him. Her name was Helen Reed, but before she married, she had been Helen Marsh. She had grown up in a house filled with old toys. Her mother bought them from charity shops, markets, estate sales, anywhere. Dolls with cracked faces, bears missing eyes, puppets with stained hands, tin animals, wooden soldiers, music boxes. Helen had hated them, especially Miss Lottie. The porcelain ballerina had been given to Helen on her 6th birthday by an aunt who died 2 days later in her sleep. After that, Miss Lottie started appearing beside Helen's bed. Every morning, no matter where Helen hid her. One night, Helen woke and saw the doll standing on her chest, its porcelain feet pressed into her nightgown. Its head leaned over her face, its little mouth opened, and a voice came out that sounded like Helen's dead aunt. "Play nicely." Helen threw the doll across the room. The next day, her cat was found inside the toy chest, folded, not curled, folded, its spine broken in 3 places, paws tucked into its mouth, tail stitched to its belly with red thread. Helen's mother said a fox must have gotten in, but the toy chest had been locked, and Miss Lottie sat on top of it, smiling. Helen learned to be kind to her toys. She brushed their hair. She set them upright. She apologized when they fell. She never left them face down. She never trapped them in boxes. She never gave one toy more love than the others, because jealousy made them restless. But as she got older, she forgot, or tried to. The toys were boxed and stored. Her parents died. The old house was sold. Miss Lottie was the only thing Helen kept. She did not know why, or perhaps she did. "Some toys are not toys," Helen whispered at the kitchen table. "They are places. Things hide in them." Caleb's father stared at her as though she had opened her mouth and let a spider crawl out. "You knew. I thought it ended. You brought that doll into our house. She was quiet for years. She bit our son. That was not Lottie." The room went silent. Marshall Buck sat between them. His cracked eyes shone in the morning light. Caleb understood before either parent did. Miss Lottie had not returned alone. The toys were waking because something had called them, something older than the house, something that understood love as ownership, something that had worn cloth skin and a cowboy hat for 50 years. Caleb looked at Marshall Buck. The doll's stitched grin seemed deeper. His father followed Caleb's gaze. "No," he said. He reached for the cowboy. Caleb grabbed Buck first and clutched him to his chest, not from love now, but panic. His father's face reddened. "Give it to me." "No, Caleb. He'll hurt you." His father stood so quickly, the chair fell backward. "Give me the damn doll." The word damn echoed in the kitchen like a slap. Marshall Buck's head turned. Just slightly, just enough. Caleb felt it against his chest. His father saw it too. All the anger drained from his face. Marshall Buck lifted one soft arm. The kitchen drawers opened at once. Every drawer, silverware rattled. Knives slid forward. Helen screamed. Caleb's father lunged across the table to grab his son. The knives flew, not like they were thrown, like they had been pulled by invisible strings. They struck him in the back, shoulders, neck, and arms. One buried itself in the soft place beneath his jaw. Another entered behind his ear. His body jerked and folded over the table, knocking over mugs and plates. Blood spread across the wood in a shining red sheet. He tried to speak, but only bubbles came from his mouth. Caleb screamed and dropped Marshall Buck. The cowboy landed standing. Helen pulled Caleb away, slipping in blood, dragging him toward the back door. The drawers slammed shut. The lights flickered. From upstairs came a sound like hundreds of small feet moving at once. But most of the toys were gone. Burned, broken, destroyed. That did not matter. The house itself remembered them. From the hallway, tiny green soldiers emerged from cracks in the skirting board, formed from ash and melted plastic. Their bodies were incomplete, faces sagging, rifles fused to their hands. Captain Orion crawled down the stairs with no legs, visor gone, something raw and glistening poolsing inside his hollow chest. Patches dragged himself from beneath the sofa, rebuilt from scorched stuffing and strips of Helen's old curtains. Tin Tom marched from the utility room, drumsticks tapping on a drum made from stretched skin. Roxy came from the dark under the stairs, rubber body blistered from fire, torn mouth opening in a silent roar. And above them all, Miss Lottie descended step by step. Her porcelain feet clicked on the wood. Her broken head leaned too far to one side. Her smile had split all the way to her ear. Helen opened the back door. The garden outside was gray with dawn. For one wild moment, escape seemed possible. Then the door slammed shut on her fingers. She screamed. Bones snapped. The sound was crisp and intimate, like twigs breaking in a quiet forest. Caleb pulled at her waist, sobbing. The door opened again. Helen fell backward, clutching her crushed hand. Marshall Buck stood at the end of the kitchen. Blood had soaked into his cloth boots. The cowboy raised one arm and pointed upstairs. The meaning was clear. Back to the room. Back to play. Helen shook her head. No. The toys advanced. The soldiers came first. They climbed over Caleb's father's body, boots sinking into blood. One soldier lost its lower half in the wet mess and kept crawling, dragging green plastic entrails behind it. Helen grabbed a chair and smashed them aside. Tiny bodies broke under the legs, but every piece kept moving. A severed arm gripped her ankle. A melted head rolled toward Caleb, mouth opening and closing without sound. Captain Orion fired the tiny plastic laser on his arm. It should have done nothing. A child's toy, a harmless light, but the red beam cut across Helen's cheek and opened her skin from ear to mouth. Blood poured down her neck. She screamed and swung the chair again, crushing Orion's head. Something inside the helmet burst with a wet pop and splattered the wall. It smelled like burned hair. Caleb ran, not upstairs, not to the back door. He ran to the living room fireplace. Beside it was the iron poker his father used in winter. He grabbed it with both hands. It was too heavy, but fear gave him strength. Miss Lottie came through the kitchen doorway. her glass eyes fixed on him. Behind her, Marshall Buck walked slowly, one cloth hand leaving red prints on the floor. Helen crawled toward Caleb, one hand ruined, cheek hanging open. "Caleb," she gasped, "the chest." He looked at her. "What?" "The toy chest. It is where they listen." Marshall Buck stopped. For the first time, the grin did not look like a grin. It looked like a warning. Helen dragged herself across the carpet. "Break the chest." The toys shrieked. Not one voice. All of them. Every toy in the house cried out at once. A high, splintering noise of music boxes, squeakers, plastic speakers, tin whistles, doll throats, and dead children whispering through stitched mouths. The lights exploded. Glass rained down. Caleb bolted for the stairs. The toys surged after him. Patches leapt and caught his pajama leg in button teeth. Caleb swung the poker down. The stuffed skull collapsed. The dog released him, but its teeth stayed in the cloth, biting even after the head was crushed. Caleb climbed. On the landing, Miss Lottie appeared ahead of him. She had moved without climbing. Her arms were open. Her cracked mouth whispered, "Play nicely." Caleb swung the poker. It struck her porcelain face. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Miss Lottie's head cracked apart. The front of her face fell away in pieces. Inside was not hollow porcelain. Inside was a nest of hair, teeth, dead beetles, and folded paper. Tiny notes, hundreds of them, childish handwriting, apologies, promises, names. Helen, Caleb, other names too old to know. Miss Lottie staggered. From the hole in her face came a wet, furious breathing. Caleb hit her again. Her head shattered fully. Something black and slick slid from the neck cavity and dropped onto the carpet. It had fingers like roots and a mouth like a torn buttonhole. It tried to crawl toward him. Caleb crushed it with the poker until it stopped moving. Marshall Buck screamed downstairs. The house shook. Caleb ran into his bedroom. The room had changed. The walls seemed closer. The glow in the dark stars on the ceiling had shifted into new patterns. No longer constellations, but eyes. Every shelf was full again. All the toys that had ever been lost or broken or thrown away were there. Not as they had been, as they had died. Burned soldiers, headless dolls, melted cars, stuffed animals with stitched mouths, puppets with snapped strings wrapped around their throats. 1,000 tiny faces turned toward him. The toy chest sat at the foot of the bed. Yellow paint, brass hinges, dark line around the lid. It breathed. Caleb could see it now. The wood expanded and contracted softly, like ribs beneath skin. The keyhole pulsed. Inside the chest, something knocked. Caleb lifted the poker. The bedroom door slammed behind him. Marshall Buck stood in front of it. No longer small, no longer soft. His cloth body stretched upward, seams splitting, stuffing bulging like swollen flesh. His painted eyes had sunk deep into his face. The pale crack across one pupil widened until Caleb saw something looking through from behind. Not a cowboy, not a toy, something that had worn the cowboy the way a hand wears a glove. Marshall Buck spoke in Caleb's father's voice. Do not break your toys. Then in Caleb's mother's voice, be kind to them. Then in Caleb's own voice, younger, sweeter, Buck is my best friend. The cowboy's mouth tore open along the stitched smile. Inside were needles, rows and rows of them. Caleb backed toward the chest. The other toys began to chant. Play. The lid of the toy chest opened an inch. Darkness breathed out. It smelled of every closet Caleb had ever feared. Every damp basement, every old attic, every hand-me-down thing that had waited too long to be loved. He saw shapes inside, children's hands, animal bones, broken doll faces, a birthday candle still smoking, a curl of his mother's childhood hair tied with ribbon, his own first tooth, his father's wedding ring, things taken, things kept. Caleb understood. The chest was not storage. It was a mouth. The toys fed it memories, teeth, hair, blood, love, fear. And in return, it let them move. Marshall Buck lunged. Caleb swung the poker. It sank into the cowboy's chest with a dull, soft crunch. Stuffing burst out, but beneath the stuffing was meat. Old meat, gray and stringy, wrapped around a wooden frame. It pulsed around the iron. Marshall Buck grabbed the poker and pulled himself along it, closer to Caleb. Needles clicked in his open mouth. Caleb let go. He grabbed the lid of the toy chest with both hands and slammed it down on Buck's arm as the cowboy reached for him. The arm flattened. Buck screamed. The toys screamed with him. Caleb raised the poker again and struck the hinge. Once, pain shot through his arms. Twice, the wood groaned. 3 times, the brass hinge snapped. The lid twisted. From inside the chest came a roar deep and enormous, impossible for something so small. The room tilted. Toys fell from shelves. The glow stars dropped from the ceiling one by one, landing on the carpet like dead fireflies. Marshall Buck tore free, leaving one arm crushed and dangling. He threw himself at Caleb. The needles in his mouth pierced Caleb's shoulder. They went deep. Caleb felt them scrape bone. He screamed and drove the poker through Buck's cracked eye. The pale pupil burst. Black fluid sprayed across Caleb's face. The cowboy convulsed. His body sagged, but the thing inside him began crawling out through the ruptured eye socket. A long black finger emerged. Then another. Caleb seized Marshall Buck by the legs and threw him into the toy chest. The darkness inside swallowed him halfway. For the first time, the cowboy sounded afraid. Not angry, afraid. His remaining hand clawed at the edge, shredding wood. Caleb slammed the broken lid down. again and again. Each strike cut Buck deeper. Cloth split, meat pulped, needles scattered. The black thing inside him shrieked, trapped between toy and chest, between hiding place and mouth. Helen appeared in the doorway. Her face was ruined. Her crushed hand hung useless. In her other hand, she held a bottle of lighter fluid from the shed. She had crawled upstairs through blood and broken toys. "Move," she whispered. Caleb stumbled back. Helen poured the fluid over the toy chest, over Marshall Buck, over the carpet, over the shelves where the toys writhed and begged. Some used Caleb's voice. Some used Helen. Some used the voices of children long dead. "Please, I love you. Do not leave me. I will be good. Play with me." Helen struck a match. For 1 second, she looked at Caleb with such grief that he understood she was seeing not only him, but herself as a child, small and terrified in another bedroom, apologizing to a porcelain doll. Then she dropped the match. Fire took the room in a single hungry breath. The toy chest burned blue at first, then green, then a red so deep it looked black. The toys ignited. Plastic curled, porcelain cracked, stuffed animals writhed as flame opened their seams and released greasy smoke. The little soldiers melted into puddles that still tried to crawl. Miss Lottie's headless body danced in the fire, arms lifted, lace burning away from porcelain limbs. Marshall Buck thrashed inside the chest, no longer speaking with stolen voices, only screaming. The scream went on and on. It followed Caleb and Helen down the stairs. It followed them through the kitchen. It followed them into the garden, where dawn had finally broken, and the wet grass shone silver beneath their bare feet. They collapsed near the fence as smoke poured from the upstairs windows. The bedroom glass cracked. Flames licked out. Sirens came later. Neighbors came first. Someone wrapped Caleb in a blanket. Someone tried not to stare at Helen's face. Someone asked where his father was. Caleb did not answer. The firefighters found what remained of him in the kitchen. They said the fire had spread strangely. They said the heat in the child's bedroom was worse than anywhere else. They said the toy chest had burned completely, leaving only black nails, melted hinges, and a patch of floorboards charred into a shape that looked almost like an open mouth. They found no cowboy doll, no porcelain ballerina, no soldiers, no stuffed dog, no Jack in the Box, just ash, and in the ash, tiny footprints, hundreds of them, all leading to the wall. The Reed house was condemned. Helen survived, though she never smiled the same way again. The scar across her cheek pulled one corner of her mouth upward, giving her the faint expression of a broken doll. Caleb was sent to live with his grandmother for a while, in a small bungalow near the coast. He had no toys there, not one. His grandmother offered to buy him some, thinking it would help. Caleb begged her not to. He slept with the light on. He checked closets. He flinched whenever music played too slowly. Years passed. Children grow. That is what saves them and what destroys them. They grow tall enough to stop believing. Old fears become stories. Stories become dreams. Dreams become something embarrassing to remember. By the time Caleb was 18, he could almost laugh about it. Almost. His mother lived in a care home by then. Her mind had become a house with too many locked rooms. Some days she knew him. Some days she called him by her brother's name. Some days she sat in silence, fingers twitching as though winding an invisible key. But whenever Caleb visited, she grabbed his wrist before he left and said the same thing. Never take back what loved you. He did not understand. Not until the letter came. It arrived in a brown envelope with no return address. Inside was a notice from a storage company. The contents of a unit rented under his late father's name were due to be cleared unless claimed. Caleb almost threw it away. He should have. Instead, on a cold November afternoon, he drove to a storage facility on the edge of town, a place of corrugated metal doors and flickering lights. The manager was a bored man with nicotine-stained fingers. Mostly old furniture, he said, unlocking the unit. Boxes, family stuff. The door rattled upward. Dust breathed out. Caleb stood very still. At first, he saw nothing unusual. A wardrobe, a rolled rug, cardboard boxes, a lamp, a stack of framed photographs. Then he saw the yellow corner beneath a stained sheet at the back. His heart slowed, not stopped, slowed as though something had placed a finger gently against it. He walked forward. The manager said something behind him, but Caleb did not hear. He pulled the sheet away. The toy chest sat beneath it. Yellow paint, brass hinges, dark keyhole, unburned, unmarked, waiting. On top of the lid was a brown cowboy hat with a bite mark in the brim. Caleb backed away. The manager frowned. "You all right?" From inside the toy chest came 3 soft knocks. The manager heard them too. His smile vanished. What was that? Caleb ran. He ran from the unit, from the building, from the storage yard, from the sound of the manager shouting behind him. He drove until his hands cramped around the wheel. He did not go back. 2 days later, the storage facility burned down. The newspaper said it was an electrical fault. 3 units were destroyed. 1 man died. The manager, they found him inside Caleb's father's unit, though no one knew why he had been there after closing. His body was discovered folded inside a wardrobe, limbs broken and arranged carefully, mouth stuffed with ash. In his right hand, he held a small plastic sheriff badge. Caleb left town after that. He changed his name. He never married. He never had children. He lived in rented rooms with bare walls and no decorations. He avoided antique shops, charity shops, toy aisles, nurseries, waiting rooms with play corners, dentists with treasure boxes, restaurants with little plastic figures in children's meals. He told himself he had escaped, but nothing that loves like that lets go. Now Caleb is old, older than his father ever became, older than his grandfather was when Marshall Buck first came into the family. He lives alone in a flat above a closed bakery. His hands shake. His hearing is poor. At night, the pipes knock in the walls. At least, that is what he tells himself. Last winter, a parcel arrived at his door. No postage label, no courier note, just a plain cardboard box tied with string. Caleb knew before he opened it. He should not have opened it. But some fears become rituals. Some nightmares demand witnesses. Inside was a child's cowboy doll. Not Marshall Buck. Not exactly. This one was newer, cleaner. Its cloth face had no stains. Its painted eyes were bright. Its stitched grin was neat. But one eye had a pale crack across the pupil, and on the bottom of one boot, in red thread that had already begun to darken, someone had stitched a name. Caleb. He tried to burn it. The flames would not catch. He tried to cut it apart. The scissors broke. He locked it in a metal box and threw it into the river. The next morning, it was sitting on his pillow, wet, smiling. Since then, the flat has filled slowly. A plastic soldier in the sugar bowl, a stuffed dog beneath the sink, a porcelain ballerina in the medicine cabinet, its head turned toward the mirror, a jack in the box on the kitchen table. Caleb does not sleep much now. He sits in his chair facing the door, all the lights on, the cowboy doll on the floor in front of him. Each night, it sits a little closer. Each night, the toys gather around it. Each night, the jack in the box plays its dying tune. And each night, from somewhere in the walls, there comes the sound of a wooden lid opening. Tonight, Caleb has decided to record his story. He speaks into a little microphone with a red light glowing on the desk. His voice is thin, dry, afraid. He tells whoever finds the recording that toys are not innocent. They are not empty. A toy is a cup made in the shape of a friend, and children pour everything into it. Love, fear, anger, loneliness, blood from bitten fingers, tears from long nights, secrets whispered under blankets. A toy drinks all of it, and some things, once filled, begin to hunger. Behind Caleb, the cowboy doll stands. Its cloth arm rises. The other toys turn their faces toward the microphone. Caleb does not see them yet. He is looking down at his notes. He is saying the final words he will ever say. If you are listening to this in the dark, and there is a toy somewhere in the room with you, do not move too quickly. Do not let it know you are afraid. And whatever you do not throw it away. The nursery tune begins. Caleb stops speaking. The microphone catches his breathing. It catches the creak of his chair. It catches the tiny footsteps crossing the floor. Then Caleb whispers, "No." The cowboy says, in a voice made from every child who ever loved it, "Play nicely." The recording ends with screaming, then tearing, then wet, careful stitching, then silence, and after the silence, very softly, 3 little knocks. Thank you for listening to Whispers in the Dark. If this story followed you into the corners of your room, leave a like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments which childhood memory you want dragged into the darkness next. But before you go, take one last look around. That old toy on the shelf, that stuffed animal in the cupboard, that doll in the attic you have not touched in years. You may have forgotten it, but it has not forgotten you. Good night.
Whispers of a love so true, painting dreams of me and you. And I'll hold you close in this moment so